We're happy to be here for our first UdK Tuesday of this semester, and Professor Vassal will introduce our first guest.
Thank you, Charlotte. Hello to all of you in Berlin, actually in Bordeaux, and thanks to be here to hear Marcelo Faiden explaining his works. Just a few words, perhaps, before. I think that to understand modern architecture, the one that emerged in the first half of the 20th century until the 80s, the one that we only accepted the premises in Europe, but never really the complete accomplishment. We have to cross the seas. We have to cross the oceans. Crossing the Atlantic, we can go to North America and we understand the accuracy, the efficiency, the relationship with economy. But in Latin America, in South America, we really get the optimum of this architecture. Pleasure, comfort, generosity, relation with climate, balconies, large balconies open to the views, terraces, relations with nature and vegetation. Sometimes even no facade if we are in some part of Brazil. In Buenos Aires, in Argentina, we find some climatic conditions that are more close to some European ones, like if we were in Lisboa, for example, in Portugal. We can find this same climatic conditions. So it's why Buenos Aires is, for me, one of the most incredible reference on modern architecture today. And I have been there several times, and each time it has been a fantastic experience. Tonight we have the chance with the office Adamo-Faiden to have one of the most brilliant representatives of this architecture with young architects. So it's a real pleasure to welcome Marcelo to this UdK lecture series, and I am really, really happy to see what he will propose us and show us. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot to be with us, even 12,000 kilometers far away.
No, it's a real pleasure to be here. So thanks a lot, Jean-Philippe, for the invitation. Thanks a lot to the UdK for the invitation too, and for this kind introduction. Well, let me share my screen so I can show some images or share some images with you. Great. Well, Jean-Philippe, you mentioned modern architecture in the introduction, and I want to start showing one of those buildings that I'm sure you visit. Yeah. I like to think that when we were students, the definition of our practice agenda already started. I think that happens whatever you like it or not. In the moment you decide what studio to choose, what book you buy, or what architecture you want to visit, you are doing that. So for us, for me and for Sebastián Adamo, my partner, while we were students inside those big buildings, it was about to create a new description about them. A very different description that our professors gave to us. We studied in the 90s, so our professors were a little bit critique about modern architecture, believe it or not. So maybe our first project was how to see modernity with our known eyes. For us, those big glass pavilions, in terms of use and in terms of abuse too, were like artificial earth crust, just exactly as artificial as the landscape around them. The landscape around them was a former dump for the rubble of large urban operation. So the design techniques to talk about these buildings for sure are not the background and figure. For sure, when you try to talk about contextualism, it doesn't work quite well. So all the theories that we were explained about this building didn't fit well with our point of view. So that uncomfortable situation, uncomfortable in terms of strict discipline, made us move us forward and try to see the plan of this building as a strategy for indetermination of use. Maybe more close to the radical Italians or Archisum or something like that in our minds, rather than other signs of functionalism, rationalism, etc. For us, this plan, this strategy, was a way to organize freedom. To let also the contingency and let the everyday life finish the work. Try to think about architecture as an infrastructure for the event. So if our practice agenda started by creating a self-designed contract with the past, those stacked platforms were the best place to observe also the present, to get to see the things around you and also the things a little far away. So to choose a specific present was another moment of this same project. For us, Avalos y Herreros represented, like no other office at that time, a strong commitment with the present. The project still emanates like an optimism that makes possible to think that each occasion truly hides the possibility to develop an architecture capable of moving us. So through a national competition for students, we had the chance to spend 3 years doing our PhD and working in Spain, and being close enough to see with our own eyes the production of the offices that captivated us. Of course, not only in Spain. So for us, every weekend was a chance to rent a car, drive a few hours, not so many from an Argentinian point of view, and with a lot of time and a lot of faith, of course, jump over a fence and get to see with no invitation at all how things were being made. So visiting Mulhouse housing by Lacaton and Vassal was very important for us to find out about the possibility of creating a consistent practice, but focusing in things that you can insist with, to focus on things that you can try over again and again. At that time, we were sure that we wanted to have a practice that let us practice architecture. That seems to be a simple idea and kind of obvious, but we believe it is not. Because for doing so, you have to choose the right position, you had to choose the right environment, and for us, again, it meant to look back from the distance, again, to Buenos Aires and try to see it in a totally different way. Focusing for the first time in those thousands of plots floating in the air. For us, those infrastructure leftovers were privileged places related to the sky that is the only natural element that you can find in this big sea of concrete. So this was the place we chose to build our version of UdK primitive hut, not in the natural soil, but on top of the city, surrounded by it, but without any urban references. So the pavilion steps back from the edge of the building in order to create a perimeter of plants that filters the light. And we used the same structural design for two kinds of spaces, a filter exterior in one hand and a gardened interior in the other. This primitive hut, it's nothing but an open plan related to urban hedonism and with no specific use or program, because the existing organization already solved that problem. These are the plots that I am talking about. This was the place for us to rearrange the design tools that we discovered through our conversation with the past and the present of the discipline. Working with the same light elements to build a roof that the house never had, a roof made of air. Using the urban fabric as our heart crust, finding this new incredible topography, like it's like finding a sloping new ground in the middle of the Pampas plain soil. So again, the typical house already existed, as you can see in this plan on the bottom. So this is about adding, again, a big room with no specific use, structured by three patios. The one you can see here on the left, the other is in front of the observer. So it is built with a metal mesh and glass that tries to dilute the interior and exterior using the same concrete floor, the same steel structure in order to create an atmosphere related to a new landscape that is the interior of the city block. You can find it there through the transparencies of the metal mesh, or you can find it even in the reflections of the glass. So from this point of view, the discontinuity of the city fabric could be an opportunity. Could be an opportunity to try to capture a big amount of air and use it every party wall accident to find a specific geometry for this permeable roof. A permeable roof that protects you from the sun, while creating intimacy in an outside room, made with a very cheap agricultural plastic mesh. That is how this device is made of. So changing the way you refer to things can be a powerful design technique also. Once you uncover a former water tank, you can call it an air swimming pool. And just like this, the second after, you can enjoy your neighborhood from a new point of view. You can enjoy the trees totally different. So in this scenario, every element starts to share responsibility. That's why they start to become lighter. And that's why you can have this glass room because only because you have a shadow device on top of it. So we also had the chance to taste this same idea, these same materials and programs, working not only on top of an existing building, but in this case, by the side to it, next to it, and also below it, as you can see here. When taking away the obsolete machines and their big rooms that surround them, in order to connect the street to the back garden, of this 70 townhouse. Also by adding a 3 meters deep pavilion to improve the circulation of air, to improve the circulation of people, also like adding another stair, and of course connecting two gardens, the exterior and also the interior, using this same pavilion to contain the existing pool while creating a porch or a terrace. Well, this is a little far away from Buenos Aires in a productive landscape. So those pavilions are infrastructure pavilions, actually, that were made for feeding bulls and cows. So this is, again, moving here the same kind of room I've been talking about, but not on top, not by side, but in this case, inside an existing structure. Bridging the existing pavilions in order to create a single house. So you can cross the patio to take the stairs and take a look to the Pampas plain from that terrace, and then turn back and get inside this kind of loggia. Those are the plans. So the four towers the structure already had are used to make four rooms, to place the bedrooms and some bathrooms, and then to create a single open space with radially arranged beams, as you can see here, in order to dilute those through the three parts of this composition. So maybe the last iteration that we did of this kind of room, this kind of program, this kind of addition or subtraction happens under a very old villa, very old for Buenos Aires, of course. So this was the existing relation that villa has with its garden, that from the piano nobile. That was the typical relation that villas offer in the beginning of the 20th century, with a distant and contemplative relation with nature. So we discovered again that the basement was obsolete, full of service rooms and engine rooms, that it was made of massive load walls made by brick. So for us, that was the opportunity to create a new contract with the house and the garden. So we literally cut the house here in this line. So you can understand our intervention by following this C-shaped structural beam that only touches the ground in the new entrance and in the new stair that we created. So storage and service room program are behind those corrugated panels. And this garden that you can see here was a former asphalt driveway to the mechanical workshop beneath the house, and also to the driver's bedroom. It was a really big house, but this was what we wanted to achieve, this new horizontal relation with the garden. So again, what we are building, what we are proposing here is a multi-purpose open room with the same material, the same concrete floor, the same steel elements, the same lightness, but completely rhetoric this time, because that structure is holding the whole house. So what we are doing is creating the sensation of a marquee out of this house. Well, I like to think that while our practice is informed by the work of others, it becomes particular. At the same time, it overlaps to a specific occasion. The next three cases I want to share with you are finally built from head to toe. Yes, are complete pavilions. Yes, but they have one restriction, that they coexist with other buildings in the same plot. So this is a group of small pavilions that are forced to take a different position, as you can see here, like turning its back from the party wall and like looking somewhere else other than the street. This is in order to let that little patio survive, the existing patio for the existing house. Also to create a cover entrance for both houses, and also for elevating the new house main rooms. Elevating some plants too, while creating a safety device that has to be essential at the same time. So the 90-degree rotated pavilion from the street alignment is in order to catch the best views to the neighbor's garden, and also to try to catch the best light. The interior, it's a big portion of air, where furniture plays a very important role to define the use of it. And the last room, it's an open air observatory. So this other construction that is also part of the same group, it occupies the front patio of a small factory that still works on the back of the same plot, owned by the same families that actually lives in those new two houses. So the ground floor has two entrances, one for the factory, the other for the house. And there is an exterior stairs that connect the garden with the houses, with the terrace. The houses are very narrow, so we are using the trees of the street as an internal wall. With a very light and cheap enclosure that climbs up to the top to create another open air room that works as a terrace, as an observatory. So the last of these small urban pavilions completes an old house, bringing there more space, like this patio and a bedroom, and adding new leisure programs to it, like this pavilion connected to the terrace, and also a pool that acts as a roof also. So this is where the roof of the old house becomes a terrace that connects itself to a pavilion that can be completely open and has the most fresh roof you can have, like this big swimming pool on top of it. So there's a possibility that at this moment of the presentation you start to feel like a little déjà vu, like when you try to focus in one building represented in an image, other buildings or fragments of building start to appear. Like, for instance, in this image is the idea of the modern curtain wall. So the last studio we did together in the University of Buenos Aires, when we used to talk with Sebastian. Now we still talk together, but in different places. Was a studio that was called Workshop for Project Technique Actualizations. So the main idea behind that studio was that the project is a form of knowledge that you can learn and use other architects' design techniques, knowing that they won't fit perfectly in your present scenario. So that little differences produce small forward movement rooted in the discipline, but fueled by day-by-day contingencies. So, of course, nowadays we know that it's better to move the glass or the window from the perimeter of our buildings in order to protect it from the sun, for example. So with that little movement, the whole composition changes, creating a different relation to the exterior. But also in Buenos Aires, as I mentioned in a previous project, you need to provide some safety devices in order to have fully glass openings. So this kind of hybrid curtain wall creates safety, of course, but also translucent kind of intimacy that that can filter a very ordinary landscape and transform it completely. So if you look at this image and start to think about the natural circulation of air that goes across those metal mesh, the Alejandro de la Sota Alcudia houses immediately appears, but only appears through the description that Iñaki Ábalos did in his book, The Good Life, right? So for us, that's what we mean by project technique actualization, to work with ideas and try to develop and try to overlap them to unimaginable situations. So designing the air by adding humidity, by creating shadow or adding new smell to the air can be a different argument to rearrange the things that we already know. It's a good way to start to study all over again in a totally different way. So it's not that we are forgetting about solid elements. We are coming back to them with a different perspective, with a different point of view. For us, this point of view, it's a good shortcut to design structure and an envelope. So that's our office inside that building. With the facade gardens that dilutes itself into the trees. But only a few times we did big models like this. We are not good at big models or expensive models. This one, we did it for the Chicago Biennial that it was 3 years ago. It was directed by Schoenstone and Mark Lee, and it was called Make New History. What they ask every participant is to choose a building and try to give a new point of view out of it. And because it was in Chicago, we choose the John Hancock building. As you know, there in Berlin, it's a Hilbersheimer's vertical city fragment, right? Designed by his former student Bruce Graham. That it's at the end it's a gradient of distances between the core and the envelope that is divided in 3/3, right? The parking in the bottom, the office in the middle, and the apartments on top. So what we did is like that collage is showing is taking one plate, one floor of one of those moments of the building, and then we created this exploded mastaba. Let's call it that way. But we use the original structure, the original core, in order to taste the evolution of housing, of working, and also mobility. So we try to mix the productive hydroponics inside domestic landscapes. For example, we also superpose a co-living scheme in Hancock's organization. We try to reinterpret the 60s kind of modular office furniture system, including leisure needs, or try to blur the limits between working and learning at the same time. Try to think how a parking can evolve into a camping, or maybe how a parking can produce urban life at the same time. For doing this experiment, we have the help of Pia Castro de la Torre, who designed and produced all the objects and subjects. And for us, this was a great chance to discuss contingency and to become script writers for a moment. But in the end, what we discovered was like another material to build with. So this next project, it's maybe the crystallization of that conversation. Again, there's a new version of the elevated gardens, a new version of this permeable curtain wall. It's like another iteration of the same things that we are trying to work with. So behind the permeable curtain wall, behind the elevated gardens, behind the glass, again, a big volume of air circulating from side to side, waiting for its occupation. The plan, it's organized in strips, the technical in the middle, the garden in the perimeters, and the open space in between. So the roughness of these constructions changes radically when it's appropriated by its inhabitants, because they can have a home like this, or workplace like this one, because the furniture is what decreased the use of this building. But for doing so, you have to offer open spaces, you have to step back for a moment and let life with all the surprises and contradictions come inside our organizations. So this could be the typological evolution of the kind of buildings that Buenos Aires is made of, but a little bit more permeable, perhaps, and open to different uses. Well, the last two projects I want to show you, I think that they complement each other. So the first one is driven by the idea of naturalization of the city, and you can see here how that general idea evolved through the years. The building I want to show you is this one on the left, and you can see how the same ideas of having a villa inside the city with a garden changed from the 80s to nowadays. No, at first every representative object as the materials, the pitch roof, the back garden, the entrance with the car, everything try to get a little bit smaller and stretch into the same plot. Now the density doubles the inhabiting surface, but the desire is quite the same. So this block is in front of a plaza, and you can describe its organization through its section, as you can see here. So the trees try to push the step pavilion back, right? And the circulation areas are here and here. So there are two types of houses. One that connects two patios to the public area, also connect individually to the parking lot, and then go up to the more private areas. And the other, you get into the middle of the house and then go down to the bedrooms and go up to your garden, to your elevated garden. So the whole building is wrapped in with a ventilated facade with aluminum curtains. And those are the circulations and the patio I described before. You can see that those are not apartments at all. They are still feel like houses with very fluid and a spatial continuity related to two kinds of patio, compressing the surfaces in the walls in between, and climbing to those bedrooms in the first floor. So those houses are also related by patio. Those patios are elevated from the ground, but related to it. And then on top, you get inside this plan, go down to this one, and go up to the third. They are very simple organized plans, simple but not easy to do, I must say. So those are the bedrooms, and those are the terraces I talked about. So at the same time, we were working in the naturalization of the city. We were doing the first block of a mixed-use, mid-density urbanization that hopefully will become an alternative to the individual houses that destroy the periphery of Buenos Aires. This could be called like an urbanization of this kind of landscape. That's what I'm insisting, these opposite ideas between those projects. So each building here is positioned in order to create a specific relation to the environment. One of them is related to the civic plaza. The other is aligned with a very small pavilion that organize the yacht club on it. The third, it's row houses and also commercial spaces with patio that rotates a little from the other in order to save this public beach, that this is the most intense moment that this new neighbor has in relation to other neighbors. So in the moment we rotated this building here, we had the chance to move the cars and save it. So instead of thinking of the block as a consolidated solid, we worked on a group of buildings arranged in such a way that the central space can be open and accessible. So the apartment block faces the lake. It's a structure from its perimeter element. So those elements, as you can see here, and also all around the plan, organize the barbecues and the kitchens and the terraces, big terraces, also the fireplaces and the services in the back, leaving the rest of the perimeter open to the landscape. We have finished in this block. We have finished one of those buildings. It's a service buildings with commercial spaces in the ground floor. Sorry, and the small workspaces that are wrapped in the gardens we've been working with, but in the four sides of the pavilions. So the same solution we are offering to the terraces, we are giving to the open air circulation. So those are the circulation with the plants that move very close to the windows. There are no doors. There are just sliding glass panels in order to get in and to connect the units with the other part that have the same size, which are the gardens next to it. Well, so to finish this presentation, I would like to show you a very little intervention that we did with our friends BAO in São Paulo for the last São Paulo biennial. We were requested to do a site-specific installation inside the SESC 24 de Mayo, the building that was designed and built by Paulo Mendes Tarrocha and MMBB. It is located in the center of São Paulo, a very dense city, as you know, but in this case, very close, with a very close distance between tall buildings. So the way that is used, this building is used, is like what everybody does is they take the elevator to the top. This is an open space under the swimming pool. That could be another design technique that we stole. And then you get back. You start to go down through the ramps and seeing all the surround landscape around it, just like the Guggenheim of New York, maybe. So the good thing about these buildings, this public vertical building, is that you can recognize your own environment for the first time. If you live in a very dense city like Buenos Aires or São Paulo, climbing up these buildings like the terrace of the University of Buenos Aires that I shown before, it's a complete revelation for you to knowing where you live. That's why knowing that these artifacts are a way to discover the environment, we wanted to do our intervention not inside the building, but outside. So what we did is to rent an apartment outside the building next to the big window next to the elevator I mentioned. The installation consists in this 4 mirror that takes the total dimension of the window that are arranged in a kind of flip pyramid that reflects the sky, reflects the streets, and also the city around you. So that's the back part of it. The infrastructure of that effect is that. But at the end, what you get to see is that the sky, that the street, and the city itself, and even yourself as an individual, are part of this whole complex system. And I think that talking about those elements and showing them in that way, for me, it's a good way to leave the conversation open, putting the main topics of this presentation on the table. Thank you very much.
I really thank you a lot for this project. For me, what is incredible, it is the intelligence of through all these projects. I remark also the beauty of the drawings and the precision of the drawings, and I think it's also extremely important in your work. Charlotte, I don't know now. Is there some? It happens. There are some questions, or
yeah. So I want to tell everybody to think of questions again, and let us know either through the YouTube chat or the Telegram group. Thank you very much. That was very inspiring, and I think everybody wants to go to Buenos Aires now.
They are all invited. Hey, Lena, you are there. How are you?
So the first question that was asked by a student is, where does the attention to the pools come from?
All right. Remember the talk that we were having just before the presentation started about all the population starting from this pandemic and leaving the city, right? So for us, it's not about the pools themselves. Also, the pools can be in the same group as the garden, as the big rooms, and as the idea of another kind of luxury, different than expensive materials. It's like a crusade to reinvent the city, to show it in another way, and try to defend the most complex project that we all together did, right? That it's not because I just love living in the city, just because it's a great tool to democratize the transportation, the education, the health, and everything. So in order to double our pressure on it, it's good to bring some ideas from outside and try to test them. Nothing more than that. I'm not a good swimmer or nothing like that.
Thanks. Other questions?
Let's see. Maybe they're being thought up right now.
Mm-hmm.
So there's another person who writes, thank you very much for the inspiring lecture. I would be interested in your clients. What kind of people are they? Do you usually collaborate with the same ones?
That's a very nice question. Well, there are different types of clients. I will start explaining the one related to the mid-size buildings. Those clients were a project too. There were not a client that knock on a door and say, hey, let's do a building in the way you want, right? We have to invent ourselves those clients, try to think in Buenos Aires, not as a place with a very clear housing programs or something like that. Also try to think about Buenos Aires with people not having confidence in the banks, not having confidence in the peso argentino, in the money itself. So what we did, we also have the chance to understand that the way thing works, and we try to look at plots in the city. We develop project, we put them a price, and then try to bring future owners together. So most of the times, those efforts were in vain, because when we finally put together the interested people, like a community building, the plot was already sold. But maybe we did this exercise like 6 or 7 times. And the good thing about designing your own client is that what brings together the interest of the client is the project. The project exists before the clients, right? So that led us to work with our own agenda. We have to take care about the cost of the things, of course, but we knew how to design the Excel numbers with the same precise as we did or as we do details, right? So that's what one kind of clients. The others are all life friends. Those small pavilions, those small houses are like opportunities, like me or Sebastian say, hey, you have a plot here, don't buy an apartment so small. I think that you can do a house here with the same money. Like trying to find our way in the life itself, right? And the third, the big ones we are working nowadays, yes, they are finally like typical developers that after our first maybe 12 years of practice, they know what our investigation are built and are there, and they now, of course, they believe in it because it survived of the whole process, right? But with I want to mention this not as a main goal to jump over the fence and not to do what the previous way of getting clients. We're still working with different ways. I think that every chance leads you to different kind of freedom, so we are not letting down any of the schemes.
Thank you. And a question came in directly related to this answer. Sarah asks, the project, what do you mean by the fact that the project exists before the clients?
Wow, this works online very fast. That means that you have at that time there were I'm talking about 2005, so there were not online plots. One important thing to say that the plots here at that time were not so expensive, okay, and a house was not expensive at all. Now it's a little bit expensive, but not as expensive as Europe, okay? The good thing about America is that it's not made yet. We have a little more space than you. That's the thing I discovered from Europe. The project exists before the client because what we did is to learn better than any other development how the city grows, where the city can be cheaper but good enough, and we choose a plot and then we do a project knowing the price of the plot and doing a project that works well financially. And then with those plans in one hand, maybe a few images and a big Excel sheets, we visit some friends, or most of our friends got their first house out of that. My house, it's also where I'm here, is one of those. That's how I managed to get one. So that's why the project exists before the client. The first thing you do is the project that organize the whole thing. Of course, there is a risk. It's a very risky movement, but for us, it was more important to risk in that way rather than competitions. Of course, we do competitions all the time, but in Buenos Aires, what we saw at the time, and sadly what we see nowadays, is that those competitions are not being built. And as I mentioned in the presentation, we wanted to have a practice that let us practice architecture. We wanted to try things again and again. We needed to work a lot. So that's why we were not afraid about working in ordinary buildings, right? That plays the same rules as the neighbors, because at the end, that's what the best thing like you can give to your city is to think about the common problems, not the exceptional one only.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another follow-up question, which is the idea, how are you encouraging clients for new ways of thinking and experiments? Because you also mentioned, for example, that a lot of your friends have a small plot and perhaps they don't even know what type of house they could do with this lot. And how do you see your role in kind of encouraging perhaps young people or people willing to build to maybe take a risk and build a house instead of a small apartment?
Okay. Well, the good thing about taking care of the whole process is that you learn to get to communicate with a very different type of people, very different type of interest. You have to learn to talk with yourself about your architecture agenda at first hand, but you have to learn to talk with the constructor. You have to learn with the tenants. You have to learn to talk with lawyers, a little bit with banks too. And when we get the exercise to talk about the buildings from a different angles, then you can talk with your friends or whatever client in the angle they can understand. So we are not talking about, I'm not explaining the project in the same way I'm explaining it to you right now. I don't want to teach them how they relate to others' architecture or how they relate. I mean, it's important from our point of view. It's important for an architect to have a big vision of the world, not just as the thing we are responsible for. And in that sense, it's easy to understand what everyone cares about and try to explain it in a very simple and direct way.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they get to know what they got. They notice that it's totally different from their neighbors or something like that at the end, not in the beginning.
And then there's another question by Gianfranco. I see there's a particularity in regards to the importance, height, or dimension that ground floors take in the projects. Where does that come from?
Well, we take a lot of care of the ground floor. My PhD thesis, it's about how the tall buildings relates to the city. That's the main topic, because well, I don't want to get so much into this, but because I can get out easily. But it's an important moment, because if you want to have good infrastructure, you're going to need some density. And if you're going to have some density, maybe that density is not related to the urban fabric that around you. So the only moment that you have to put those interests together is the ground floor, right? So that's where all the negotiations happens. And yes, we try to focus in that thing with different strategies, but that is why we care so much about that place.
Thank you. And then there's another question by Helene regarding the question of existing buildings in a city today. So how much of a role does this play for you? Maybe also seen in confrontation with buildings that are completely new. Like you mentioned, some buildings are built from scratch. what is the role of dealing with what we already have and existent buildings in the city today?
Well, I will use Jean-Philippe Vassal answer for this one because you never start from scratch, right? There is always something going on. If it's not an existing building that you can relate to, there is the urban fabric or the way the things that are already there. So maybe the way to not to separate the categories as I did is try to think about one project at once all the time.
Thank you. And then there's another question by Lena to the question sort of regarding the city as a fabric with towers. Maybe this links directly to your PhD. And the question, if a small building can make space for a new tower, no matter how high, with our questions of density and necessity for living today?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. We are working nowadays in a very big project, very big and tall tower that is so big that there is not a chance to create like a linear continuity between what happens when you are like 10 meters above the ground and 120 meters above it. Everything changed, especially in Buenos Aires because of the winds. You cannot have those fragile and movable elements because when you turn around, you have to go to catch it in Uruguay. You know, they can flow away from your building. So some things change, but some other not. And hopefully, there are a few ideas that can survive the change of scale. Let's see. Let's see how that ends. I don't know yet.
And there is one more question regarding the ground floors. Does the security situation in Buenos Aires play a role at all for designing these and developing them?
Yes. If you look around, if you go the street, you take the street view in the moment this finish, and you choose any street of Buenos Aires, you will notice that there are balconies with a beautiful 1 meter high handrail, and then at least the first 4 or 5 floors are covered with different kind of metal mesh or plastic mesh. I collect them. I have tons of pictures of them. In one case, because the young couples are afraid to their children fall off the buildings. That's strange. But in other cases, because are afraid of safety problems that really exist. So what we are trying to do all the time is to change the melody of the sentences. You know, if you say like, oh my God, there is a safety problem, what do I have to do to relate to that? Or have to put a lot of strong things and make the doors or windows very strong. Or maybe you can use like very translucent materials and then forget about the handrails and change the whole composition. Those hybrid curtain walls that I showed to you were about discovering that if you embrace that problem, you can get something out of it.
And then there's another question. Thank you very much for the lecture. Just wondering, I can imagine how humid and hot it is there. I'd like to know how you consider about the urban development. For example, the weather is actually really hot.
Well, yes, it's hot, but just to get a closer compression, yeah, maybe the weather is very like the Portugal weather, like Jean-Philippe mentioned. I mean, we did a few urban projects, but the first we really spent a lot of time was the one I show you at the end of the presentation, that urban block that let us, because that land was not already made, we have the chance to define that block and also to get to move the perimeter of that block. If you look carefully at those plans, they are available, I guess, in our website. They are full of semi-covered places, patios, and all the time you have to be next to a tree. Buenos Aires, the good thing about Buenos Aires and building here is that the trees do all the hard work. You have a very strong wall of trees, so if you step back from it enough, then you don't have to do much in order to not to fail, right? So if you have the trees and you have covered spaces in the ground floor, maybe you have half of the job done.
Mm-hmm. Perhaps one question. It's okay. It's okay. If you can talk about this question of density in Buenos Aires, for example, you see that the flow ratio. You say in Argentina we have more space than here in Europa, but in fact we see also that flow ratio in Buenos Aires sometimes like 10, when in Paris, for example, it is limited to 3. So in fact, you also have this idea of density, but also in the same time, the idea of generosity. We see in your project the amount of void, the amount of space that you develop, which that gives you also the possibility at each level to have some terraces, to have some balconies with plants and gardens, etc., and swimming pools. So it is this combination of a density situation, but in the same time a generosity situation. And perhaps you can say some words about that.
Yeah. Well, I think that you cannot have one without the other, because if you don't have enough density, there won't be no need or no energy to build that generosity of space. And in the other hand, if you don't bring that freedom or yes, freedom to dwell in that way, that density will become a bad word, something not desirable. So maybe those elements have to be the same elements of the same two faces of the same coin, or something like that, because each one of them separated from the other, it doesn't make sense for us. They are when you put those things together, that's maybe an idea of a city to develop. You need both of them to think about our idea of Buenos Aires.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to everyone for the questions. Thank you, Marcelo, for the great talk. And thank you, Professor Vassal, for inviting such an inspiring first guest.
It was a big pleasure. Thanks to you. I hope to see you someday. Right?
Yeah, we hope to see you in Berlin, and probably all the students would love to see you in Buenos Aires. And I think it's a really a fantastic place to go and to see the city and to see your work. Thanks a lot, Marcelo, for your time, for your lecture. It was really important for UdK lectures.
Thanks to you, and let's